was like, what?
This is the European History Lecture for Monday, 8th May 2nd, 2022. So I will wish you a happy Communist Labor Day +1. Make sure you get your notes out. Because around the world on May Day, which is synonymous with, oh my God, we have a disaster, communists and their fellow travelers get together to get the workers of the world to raise a fist in defiance against the people who gave them jobs so that they could earn a living for their families. Make them pay for that choice. And to argue in general for the benefits of the working class divorced completely from the context of a broader society. We in the United States are traditionally anti-communist, and that's why we celebrate our Labor Day at the end of the summer with barbecues and ball games. Any questions? Yes?
In 2011, midnight of May 1st, May 2nd, they shot Bin Laden in the face.
They shot what?
Bin Laden in the face.
Well, that's a good happy.
No, like last midnight, 2011.
Yeah. No, that is a happy memory. It should have happened sooner, one hopes, but at least it did happen. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. And who kept him? Pakistani military, and who's behind them? The Chinese Communist Party. So, just understand who our friends and enemies are around the world. Yep.
Is that for us or is that for them?
Okay.
Nothing.
Haley, remember at the beginning of the year when I had my ancient over here and my European over here? Well, then I switched back because of you for most of the year, and I'm switching back again now because this is the way I want it.
Wow. Why would we be learning about the high middle age?
Well, I didn't see that.
Well, I
just
could
saw
be
it.
flipping back. See, she doesn't look at the board. She just sort of glances
No,
at
I
it.
saw the pretty triangle, and so I looked at it.
Moving on!
This is going to take
So, last week we talked in some detail about the Nuremburg Laws on race and racial purity, and how they also referred to the sterilization of the mentally incompetent. Now, there are two occasions, and only two, where the captive people of Germany actually stand up to Adolf Hitler. One of them was the sterilization campaign. And in both cases, it was done through the wives. The wives of the Nazi Party members who had wives, which is most of them except for Hitler, heard from their neighbors, who heard from their neighbors, who heard from their friends and neighbors. The thing about mental illness and mental retardation and birth defects is that almost every family is touched by them. Almost everyone has a personal recollection or relationship with a person who is not fully there. And when families began arriving at insane asylums and other facilities to find that their relatives and loved ones had been sterilized against their will, and without the family's knowledge, they were angry. This was a violation of the family. It's a violation of even the Nazi principle, where we are all one people together. And the displeasure was serious enough for Hitler to back off. Now, there was still encouragement to have the family sign off on the sterilization of people who would not contribute to the genetic health of the Deutsche Volk, the German nation. But the forced sterilization of German citizens and the relatives of German citizens against their will was stopped. Now, the enforcers in Hitler's regime are not the street-brawling brown shirts, the SA, the Sturmabteilung. They are neutered in the Night of the Long Knives. No, the enforcers in Hitler's regime wear fancy Hugo Boss company design uniforms in black, the Schutzstaffel, the SS. So if you see a World War II German in a black uniform with 2 lightning strikes at the collar and a death's head on the crown of his cap. That is a member of the Schutzstaffel, or the SS. The SS are Hitler's bodyguards. That's how they start out. And their leader is Heinrich Himmler, a former turkey farmer and pig farmer, the son of a schoolmaster, who the outside world called the decent one. He was the decent Nazi. He was quiet and unassuming, and he seemed so decent. This is the guy that's the head of the organization that perpetrates the war crimes of the National Socialist regime. The decent one. The SS will form a state within a state, and it's based on the Society of Jesus, the Jesuit order. The selection of the SS is a process that tests one's Aryan genetic credentials going back several generations. You cannot have any Jewish blood or non-Aryan blood, but it's more than that. The SS involves an initiation that is similar to the spiritual exercises, except it's a neo-pagan Germanic ritual designed to recreate the old pre-Christian Germanic beliefs with a Nazi face. So the SS is modeled on a religious order, and it always sees itself as a religious order like the Knights Militant, the Knights of Malta, the Knights Templar, but for the German race and for the German nation and for the Fuhrer. Now, the Gestapo is the special state police, the political police. You know, a police force that polices attitudes and looks for disinformation. Not that we in a free country like the United States would ever establish a government institution designed to, I don't know, spot disinformation, at least as far as the ruling class decides. No, we would never do that. Biden's trying to. I am shocked that the British have allowed themselves to be under a variant of this type of board for the last 2 generations, to the point where you can't talk about politics if somebody who's Islamic or not white Anglo-Saxon Protestant gets offended by it. You could be accused of a hate crime just for expressing a political point of view. Well, in Germany, the Gestapo polices the civil population, looking for signs of unhelpful attitudes, of insufficient enthusiasm, of critical opinions, critical of the state, critical of policy. There are Gestapo agents everywhere. They don't wear uniforms. They just identify themselves when they're asking you or telling you to come downtown with them and have a talk. The SS will later, well actually, will be given control of the network of gathering places or concentration camps that the Nazis set up for subhumans and traitors and anyone else that doesn't quite fit into their order. And ultimately, the SS will be responsible for turning some of those concentration camps or building new ones that are labor camps designed to provide slave labor for companies like the IG Farben Chemical Company, which still exists, and others. And the SS will be tasked with the final solution to the Jewish question, which is first attempted by commando units called Einsatzgruppen, and later by the death camps, which are a special set of camps that are literally an assembly line where live Jews enter through the gates and dead Jews leave through the chimney. Yes.
This dude, I don't remember his first name. His last name was Prauss, 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 I don't know.
Okay.
But he ran one of the concentration camps, the Green Dock one.
Yeah.
And he had them it used to be a Belgian fortress thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Nazis came in and kind of reconstructed it and added different things. And so he had the Jews move 500,000 tons of sand just because he wanted to, but for no specific reason. It's just there now. But just because that was the only labor that they had left for them.
Well, that is because the idea of warehousing Jews was probably offensive to him. He wanted them to exert themselves. When you run a death camp or a concentration camp, I'm not sure which this one is, you can experiment with your theories on humanity, on your subjects. I mean, they're disposable people. You can use them up. Might as well use them up because they're not going to last. And that is the attitude they had. So the SS is going to become a particularly important part of the National Socialist regime, and it will in every way mirror the national government and the party structure. The SS even provides some of the most crack and elite military units to the German military in World War II, the Waffen-SS, the Fighting SS. Get the best weapons, the best training, and they're the ones that are first given assault rifles, the STG-44, which is the world's first assault carbine. They have some of the best tanks. The SS are there to make sure that Hitler and the regime are insulated even against an army revolt. They do the dirty work. Now, Dachau is the first concentration camp. It's set up by Hitler in the first months of his regime. It's in southern Germany. And at first the SA run it, then the SS. And it is a gathering place, the first of many, for the undesirables in Germany. Homosexuals, Jews, gypsies, devout Christians of Catholic and Protestant type wouldn't accept the changes in the church in Germany. I don't like it when I see flags on altars. That bothers me. Because the Nazis brought the national flag into the church. I think that there's a wonderful place for flags in the entryway to the church. I think that the idea of God and country is a powerful and important thing. But the altar is supposed to be for Christ if you're a Christian, not the state. And what the Nazis ended up doing was elevating the Hakenkreuz, the swastika, the twisted cross, over the cross of Jesus Christ. Literally, in many churches, the swastika was over the cross. The national flag was brought into the church, and there were Christians, again, Catholic and Protestant, who objected to this, and there were several martyrs made. St. Maximilian Kolbe was a Roman Catholic priest who was martyred by the Nazis. Among the Protestants, there is Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the leader of the Confessing Church, which is a Reformed Christian church within German Protestantism that refused to allow itself to be Nazified. To their shame, many Lutherans went along because of Luther's willingness to compromise with the princes of Germany. We talked about this earlier in the year. As to the Roman Catholic Church, since the 1960s, a calumny has been set up against Pope Pius XII, calling him Hitler's Pope, because people didn't appreciate that Pius didn't take a public stand against Nazism. No, Pius didn't do that. Instead, Pius helped organize anti-Nazi cells within Germany, including the one that almost killed Hitler in July of '44 with the blast in his headquarters, the Valkyrie plot, the Stauffenberg plot. Pope Pius was personally involved in establishing anti-Nazi groups, including Admiral Canaris's anti-Nazi conspiracy in the German Abwehr, which is their military intelligence. The Roman Catholic Church under Pius XII also helped smuggle many Jews out of Italy and out of Germany. No, he didn't take a stupid and open symbolic stance, But Pius did deem Hitler to be a satanic ruler, and he did work to have the church organization work to protect Hitler's enemies and to try to undermine Hitler's rule. So there were many people who didn't fit in. There's the famous White Rose movement of students born before and during World War II who opposed Nazism and the Nazification of their education. So concentration camps were set up for anyone who either by birth or by choice didn't fit into the new order. Now we come to an anniversary near the time of the anniversary of the Beer Hall Putsch. Beer Hall Putsch was in 23. This is November 1938, so it's the 15th anniversary. And at this time, Hitler is experimenting with an idea. The Russians did pogroms for centuries against the Jews. What would a German pogrom look like? And in Paris, a Jew assassinates a German diplomat. And that becomes the cause of what is called Reich Kristallnacht, the Imperial Night of Broken Glass, or just Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass. Around Germany at sunset in early November, people begin to notice pyres being set up for bonfires. And the police are informed that there will be actions against the Jews led by party officials, and that the criminal police will not interfere. The criminal police and the fire services and the emergency services will stay out of the way, except if fire threatens to spread to German homes or if violence is visited upon Aryan families. So the police are ordered to stand down. Party officials begin gathering people at these bonfires as the sun sets, and they begin speaking. And the people at these rallies are worked into a froth. When the death of the German diplomat is announced, there was an assassination attempt. He was in the hospital. The question was, will he live, will he not? It's unlikely he would. When he died, at that point, the crowds are loosed. Now, there are bricks. Not that we'd ever in Coeur d'Alene ever have somebody ship in pallets of bricks for a protest. Yeah, Antifa tried that a few years ago. We met them with armed men with battle rifles. And they didn't come. But in Germany, 1938, November of, the fires were used to gather the people, and the bricks were used to pass through the glass of the window of every Jewish business, every Jewish home in Germany, in every farm community, in every village, in every town, in every city neighborhood. The Jews had previously been identified. Everyone knew who they were. They had to register. They weren't citizens anymore. And it's called Reich Kristallnacht because it was initiated after the speeches by the bricks going through the windows. It'll be a few minutes. After the windows are clear of solid panes of glass, Jew, come down! Juden, kommen! Now, if the Jews immediately obeyed, the men, particularly men and boys, they were often smacked around and beaten, not too seriously, and then the crowd would go into the house and loot it. And the women and children had best not make a problem, because if they did, they would be smacked around and maybe killed. If a Jewish man decided to stand up for himself, his wife, his children, or his property, he might be maimed right there on the spot. He might even be killed right there on the spot. That evening, tens of thousands of Jews from all over Germany are taken away. Later, the government doesn't say where, but one can assume it's Dachau or one of the other concentration camps. Every Jewish synagogue and temple in Germany is set ablaze after the treasures are raided and stolen by the SS. Special medieval scrolls and bits of gold. Throughout Germany in the morning, piles of smoke are rising from, again, every community of people. And this is the second and last time the German people will make opposition known through the women folk. The wives of the Nazis once again hear from their friends and neighbors, who've heard from their friends and neighbors, that this is not in Ordnung. This is not in order. Our children in our homes could not help but notice that right across the street, their neighbors were being beaten to a bloody pulp. Their neighbors' homes were being ransacked by mobs. Buildings down the street were set ablaze while firemen laughed and watched and made sure the fire didn't spread. Great horror of this is that these weren't strangers. These were neighbors. These were people who maybe had had family homes beside one another for generations. You have any sugar? Here, have a pie. Can you watch my kids while I'm out? Do you have any advice? My kid is sick. These are neighbors doing it to people they personally know, not a bunch of strangers. That's what Nazism, that's what totalitarianism does, is it convinces otherwise sane people, decent people, just ask them, they'll tell you, to do the most heinous, horrible things, because they believe that common sense no longer applies. Hitler never does a pogrom like this again. Pogroms are Russian, they're chaotic, bloody-minded, they're hot, they're dramatic, they're distracted. No. From now on, everything that Hitler does will be quiet. It won't stop. It'll actually, the anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic policies will intensify, but they won't be done in the street loudly by angry mobs. They will be done quietly by government bureaucracy, and the Jews will just disappear from life, bit by bit, one by one, until they're gone, scrubbed. And everyone in the society understands that if you stand up to the Nazis, they'll murder you. The Night of the Long Knives and their other policies prove this. Doesn't matter who you are. You could be a nobleman, you could be a priest. They'll murder you. They'll take you out of the world. They'll put you in a concentration camp, no due process. They won't confirm that you're there. They won't promise your family any visits. And they'll torture you. Maybe brainwash you. Maybe send you back completely broken with a new personality. What the German people are offered is plausible deniability. After Kristallnacht, everything that is done discreetly. And if you don't put the dots together, if you don't connect them, if you don't think about it and try to make meaning of it, then the Jews disappearing is just something that happens. Don't worry about it. Then if you live near a railhead in a weird place and they build something at the end of this dead-end rail place and you don't know what it is, but it's big, and then you start seeing trainloads of Jews going down the dead-end railhead and coming back with empty cars day after day, week after week, month after month, you don't think about it. Because if you think about it, if you notice it, if you acknowledge that what's going on is the Jews are going down a one-way railhead to a facility and they're not coming back, and there's no way on God's green earth that that facility can house as many Jews as you see go down that railhead. If you make the conclusion that maybe something is happening to the Jews down there, golly, you have to either do something about it, which will get you killed in a totalitarian police state, or will make you a victim in some other way, or you have to admit to yourself that you are covering up for the regime. The Germans don't have to do that. They don't have to come to the difficult conclusion that they are rewriting what they see in life in order to cover up for the regime. They just don't notice. We just don't notice. Yeah, Jews go down the railhead, but I never gave it any thought. I never really wondered. It's not my business. They're Jews, not people. It's not like I know too many of them or knew too many of them. And besides, what could I do about it? What could I possibly do? Get myself killed also? No. So I'm not going to notice. Like a neighbor who hears a spouse being beaten every night for 2 weeks, and then the spouse dies of her injuries. Oh, yeah, sure, officer. I heard it. People argue. I didn't think about it. Why should I think about it? It's not my business. So after Kristallnacht, Hitler learns a lesson. Give the German people plausible deniability, and most of them will run with it. And after the war, when, thanks to the Allies, the German people are marched through the camps, they are brought, every single one of them, to the nearest concentration or death camp, and they are marched through, and they are personally obliged to help clean them up. Even after that, there are still Germans who deny the Holocaust. It's all something that the Allies built. Yes?
When you were talking about the Antifa thing, I think there was a group of, I think they were National Guardsmen. I remember we were driving by downtown, and this one guy came like sprinting up to this guy in this like little army thing. And he was like, I saw like a black van, and then you see this like massive amount of people just like running towards where the guy said the black van was, and then we like were driving around a little bit, and we ended up seeing the guys, and they were like, yeah, they left. They like booked it as soon as they saw him.
Good. I will say that somebody in their movement has marked this place, and they'll be back at some point in some way, shape, or form. They always are, because they stand for the revolution. Just ask them, they'll tell you. In any event, World War II begins in September 1939. Nazi policy, though, on the domestic front doesn't stop. First of all, we have the Lebensborn program. Not Lebensraum. Lebensraum is living space. That's taken from Russia and other Eastern European countries and given to Germany. That's Hitler's plan for resettlement. Now, Lebensborn is a program that begins early in the war and is really emphasized after the massive casualties in Russia begins to become apparent. What you do is you look at the nation as a whole, as a self-perpetuating organism, and you see that there aren't enough Aryan babies being born. One of the reasons for that is that single mothers, are shamed in a society that's traditional and Christian. Why would you allow yourself to have sex with a guy when you're not married to him? It's your fault, and the baby's going to grow up with a stigma. Not stigmatism, that's an eye condition. A stigma is they're under a cloud because they were born out of wedlock, illegitimately. So Hitler's going to change all this. The Lebensborn program invites women of good Aryan stock, they're checked, like the SS, to come to some of the most beautiful castles and resorts and be available to SS men. Now, the SS men probably have wives and children back home, but they have a duty to procreate for the state. So the women are matched with the SS men like breeding cattle for certain traits: blonde hair, blue eyes, creamy skin, strong jaw, aggressive disposition, the ultimate in what Hitler considers to be the German form, physiologically and psychologically. They are bred. And the women are going to be cared for during the pregnancy, as long as they promise to raise their children as good National Socialists. In fact, to agree that let the state help them raise their children as good National Socialists. And the plan is for these children of Lebensborn to be raised by the Nazi Party itself. Who will be the elite a generation or two after Hitler? Not children necessarily from families, but the children of the state, the children of Lebensborn, people specially bred for leadership. Now, oddly enough, President Xi of China comes from a program more ideological than racial, but a program a bit like this in China. He was raised as separate from the everyday Chinese person and even from the everyday Communist Party official. He was raised to become a ruler. The Lebensborn, had they had time, would have raised the future leaders of National Socialism. The war ended before we do that, but there were still huge numbers of babies born in Lebensborn. I knew the daughter of Lebensborn people, a woman who became later a West German and then later German television journalist named Nora. She was the absolute. I mean, if you pictured German woman, cream skin, bright blue eyes, blonde hair, features that are right out of the playbook for German womanhood, there she was, and it was because one of her parents was of Lebensborn. At least that's the impression I had. The hierarchy of races is something that the National Socialist Party is going to enforce as it conquers more land. The Aryans, the Germanic and Scandinavian peoples, are the master race. The Scandinavians aren't quite awake yet. The Dutch also aren't quite awake yet. They're more corrupted. But once they learn good Nazi traits from the German people, they can be trusted. They are race comrades. They are race brothers and sisters. The English also, not the British, not the Scots, not the Welsh, not the Irish, but the English are Anglo-Saxon. That's Germanic. That's Aryan. So one of the reasons why Hitler is going to treat England different than every other enemy is because England and Germany have the same blood. They're both Germanic peoples, at least as far as Hitler is concerned. Underneath this master race are the servitor races, the Celts, the Italians, the olive-skinned peoples of Mediterranean Europe, and you can trust them to be your secretaries and your wet nurses and your butlers and your maids. Under them are the slave races, the Slavs of Eastern Europe, who look like Germans, but they're not. They're Poles, they're Russians, they're White Russians, they're Ukrainians, and so forth, Serbs. And there are the slaves of India in Asia, of East Asia, China and Japan, although the Japanese are going to later be made into honorary Aryans because they're allies of Hitler. The blacks of Africa and the red natives of the Americas. And then, of course, there are the subhumans, the Untermenschen, who are the Jews, the Gypsies, and others who don't fit in, as well as people who are individually unsuitable, homosexuals, liberals, devout Christians, Jehovah's Witnesses, and mass are rounded up. And this hierarchy matters. Martin Luther King famously says in the early to mid-1960s, actually, I have a dream that one day my children will be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Now, modern race activists don't like this very much because they want to perpetuate racism. It keeps them in work. But that's Martin Luther King's dream. Hitler's dream was the opposite of that. Your birth characteristics determines your fate, your worth, your trustworthiness, also your choices, but first and foremost is the foundation of your genetics, your race. Now, Hitler and his folk, they love euphemisms. All euphemisms. I talked about this, but I'm going to say it again. I got this from a comedian named George Carlin. He's dead now, but he used to spoof language. And he would talk about how in World War I there's a condition called shell shock. And we've talked about shell shock. The human nervous system is just not designed to stand up to days or weeks of constant shelling. Most people have damage. Some people never recover. In World War II, the same condition is called battle fatigue. 4 syllables instead of 2, and it sounds more like you're tuckered out from doing laps around the gym. No, it's the same thing as shell shock. And in Vietnam, post-traumatic stress disorder. 8 syllables. and it has all the clinical humanity of halitosis. The word halitosis, which means bad breath. What's he suffering from? Halitosis. What's he suffering from? Post-traumatic stress disorder. And we now call it just a bunch of initials, PTSD. No. It's a person who can't live within their own skin. It's a person who has been shocked out of their normalcy, out of their normal life, out of their normal psychology, their normal emotions. They are in a state of shock. Whether they are chewing their own fingers off or banging their head as hard as they can into concrete walls or whatever. And there are all sorts of symptoms of what we would today call post-traumatic stress. And there are a bunch of people who use the name post-traumatic stress when they feel slightly pressured. I don't like it. I don't buy it. If you're going to equate post-traumatic stress disorder with shell shock, then what you are going through had best be equivalent to what a veteran goes through after days or weeks of being shelled. If you're just slightly upset and uncomfortable with life, that's not PTSD. That's life, where you have good days and bad days. Well, I've smoked post-traumatic stress. Why? Because he misgendered me. Shut up! No. No. Now, if he forced you to get an operation, that would induce post-traumatic stress. If he put you in a place where he could brainwash you, that's post-traumatic stress. But somebody misgendering you, or somebody offending you, or somebody saying something that you don't like, or even yelling at you, that's not post-traumatic stress. Person on the street yells at you. It's a bad moment. You're raised with a mom who yells at you every day. That could bring post-traumatic stress. Do you see the difference? There is a degree of gravity and seriousness with which we should view these things. Well, euphemism is a bureaucratic tendency to use soft language to hide hard truths. That's what you should know. It's a tendency to use soft language to hide hard truths. A tendency to use soft language to hide hard truths. That is euphemism. So, before the war, there are ideas. How do we get rid of Europe's Jews? Eichmann, who's going to be one of the architects of the final solution, supported exporting the Jews to French Madagascar. French Madagascar is not a pleasant place for Europeans. It's sticky, it's hot. It's a big jungle island, isolated from the rest of Africa. It also has a native population, the Malagasy, but the Nazis could care less about that. There was thoughts of doing a deal with the French Empire to make Madagascar into the homeland of the Jews and get them as far away from Europe as possible. That really never went anywhere because the French had colonies. They didn't want to give up Madagascar, and it's not quite far enough away. I'm sure if they had access to Alaska, they would have considered the idea of making northern Alaska the homeland of the Jews and shipping them there. Northern Alaska is not a place that's easy for anyone to live unless you're an Inuit or an Eskimo. The Russians, actually under the Soviets, set up a Jewish state near the Chinese border over here, sort of north of North Korea. It's a district, an oblast, in the Soviet Union, and it is for the Jews. So you have these weird Jewish communities due north of China, along the Trans-Siberian Spur that goes around Manchuria, and they were settled there because no one else wanted to live there. Had the British been willing to allow unlimited Jewish settlement in Palestine, the Germans probably would have sent a lot of Jews there. But every Jew that was imported to Palestine created an angry Arab. So the Jews were limited in fleeing Europe to go to Palestine, which the British ruled at that point, because the British were trying to please both Jews and Arabs, and they ended up making both groups really angry. The United States, in the 1920s, after a 40 or 50-year period of practically unlimited immigration, our leaders decided enough. What we need to do is we need to have a period of assimilation, and we reduced our immigration incredibly tight so that the children of immigrants could become more American in thought, word, and deed. We wouldn't have this constant influx of new people. Also, the American State Department had a lot of old American families that did have anti-Semitic tendencies. There were groups in Foggy Bottom, that's what we call the U.S. State Department, Foggy Bottom, because it's built in a lowland in what is already in D.C. a swamp, to resist any move to justify an increase in Jewish immigration from Europe. In fact, there was a steamer, the St. Louis, that was filled with Jews in Hamburg. This is in, I think, early 39, just before the war. And these Jews gave up everything to get on this ship. And the Hamburg went all around the Atlantic, Canada to the United States, to the Caribbean, to South America. No one would take them. One of the horror shows is that days or about a week before World War II begins, the ship returns to Hamburg. The Jews gave everything to try to get away, and no one would take them. Not us, not anyone. And they were for the ovens. So the Nazis have to find another solution. When they conquer an area, they separate the Jews from everyone else. And usually there are enough local anti-Semites to help them. The local anti-Semites, hey, you want to know who the Jews are? There, and there. They don't look like Jews, but they're Jews, trust me. Yeah, they never had a shortage of people willing to rat out their neighbors. Maybe they hoped to get some of the Jewish property. Maybe they were paying back the Jews for, imagined slights, like I didn't get a job. Why? Because the Jewish banker didn't like me. So the Jews were always separated out, and they were sent to massive ghettos, like in Warsaw. But ghettos aren't a solution. Ultimately, in 1941, when Hitler decides to go after Stalinist Russia, the real program is going to be revealed. And the real program is one of genocide. At first committed by military forces, which I'll tell you about when we do the final solution, called Einsatzkommandos or Einsatzgruppen, and later, when this fails, by purpose-built factories of slaughter called death camps. The last straw in protecting the Jews of Europe from Hitler's just completely unrestrained wrath was when Hitler declares war on the United States. He had held back before his invasion of Russia and before declaring war on the U.S. And even when he declared war, he said, if the Jews of the world bring the nations of the world into this war against Germany, we will make them pay like they have never paid before. So even at the beginning, in 1939, when the war begins, and throughout the early phase of the war, Hitler always makes a point to warn the world's Jews against getting the United States involved, against getting Russia involved until he's ready to attack Russia, because he believes the Jewish Bolsheviks run Russia and the Jewish plutocrats run the United States. As it is, he's not happy with the Jews who run England, according to him. That's the biggest problem with England, according to him, that England permits Jews to live and work and be, practically English. And he blames the Jews of within England for Britain declaring war on Germany after Germany invades Poland. So this idea of race is never far from Hitler's thinking, and it's never far from Hitler's policy. But it's almost always hushed up with the use of euphemistic language. And that's where we'll leave it for today. Any questions? Yes?
It's not necessarily a question,
Or comment or thought.
but while I was over in DC during spring break, my mom decided that we were going to go and see the Holocaust Museum.
Mm-hmm.
There were many accounts of Jewish individuals, but what surprised me is that they did have German accounts there, ones for and against. So there were several accounts from German wives who were saying they were against it. But seeing massive amounts of burned objects, there was this massive pile of shoes and hair
and hair.
And the
Because
hair surprised me because I had no
for
idea.
the German wig industry. That's one of the reasons why they shaved the heads of people. The other reason was if you're going to kill somebody, you're not going to cut their hair. It was a way of keeping the cattle, the Jews, calm before the slaughter. But yeah.
It was interesting as well because there were so many other artifacts too that were just so burned to a crisp that you could only see a tiny little bit, but other than that you had to have something tell you. It was kind of like what I would imagine could be seen of remnants from 9/11 as well. Like it was just so
Except 9/11 was a
destroyed.
single event. It was a terrorist attack
Versus several years
of government policy. It wasn't drunken, mad, barbarian, mad Russian Cossacks who did the final solution. It was guys with slide rules and pocket protectors and eyeglasses. It was engineers. They literally engineered the final solution. We'll get to that. I'm glad you got a chance to see that.
I have some pictures on one of my
If you want to email them to me, I may use them in class when we do the final solution. Seriously, I'd love that. Any other thoughts? Are you done? You don't want to cut your show. Any other thoughts? Okay.
Catherine.
Catherine.
In the back.
In the back. Hi.
There's a really good book called White Rose, and it's about the rebellions in the German colleges and the female leader who and it's written like in poetry format, so it's really cool.
The White Rose movement was a serious thing, but most of the people involved were slaughtered. Even a group of Germany's best and brightest college students could not even resist the thoughts of Hitler without him taking reprisals. Yeah.
I'm presuming you've watched Inglourious Basterds.
No, because look, Tarantino, I have to be really in the mood for it, and usually that mood involves a lot of beer. So I also, look, the idea of a bunch of guys killing Hitler, the reality to me is much more chilling than that. But go on, tell me what's good about it, or what's interesting about it.
Number one, I'd highly recommend we watch the opening scene in class.
Okay.
Maybe even the whole movie, but like the opening scene at the least.
Yeah,
it is an amazing depiction. Like, it's so well made. I know you may have a thing against Tarantino.
Well, no, I'm willing to consider it. If you can find it on YouTube, send me a link.
I have it downloaded, but I'll give it to you.
Yeah. No, I'll take a look. I have things that I show. I'm very careful about what I show when we do the final solution. So I may find it useful. It may. We'll see. Let me know. Send it to me. Thank you. Okay, we're done. You can talk among yourselves. Thank you.